This happened about 4 years ago. I was 35, a field biologist. Every summer, I took trips to study wildlife. I loved being in nature, away from the city. One year, I found this perfect spot beside a lake. It felt ideal. I set up my tent and thought I was in for a great time. The first day was calm and peaceful. I spent hours exploring the woods. At night, I lay under the stars, feeling content. On the second night, though, everything changed. I woke up to a sound. It was rhythmic knocking on my tent. I thought maybe it was a branch or something. I felt silly for getting scared and tried to ignore it. I rolled over but couldn't fall back asleep. Later, I heard it again, louder this time. My heart raced. Was it an animal? I listened hard but didn't hear any rustling, just silence. I held my breath, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. The next morning, I checked my campsite. I saw strange marks on the ground, like scratches. I wasn't sure what had made them. I looked around, but nothing else was out of the ordinary. I figured it was just some wildlife and moved on. As the days went by, things got weirder. My food supplies were disturbed, even though I had secured everything tightly. No tracks, no signs of animals. What was going on? Sometimes it felt like someone was watching me, but when I turned, nothing was there. On the fourth night, the knocking returned. It sounded more urgent this time. I sat up in my sleeping bag, frozen. I could hear whispers carried by the wind, but I couldn't make out the words. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Fear wrapped around me. I peeked outside my tent, heart pounding. The woods were dark and still. It was so quiet, I could hear my own breathing. I scanned the trees and saw a shadow move. I blinked, and it was gone. I shivered. It felt like something was right there, watching me. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed my stuff and packed everything as quickly as I could. I wanted to leave before sunrise. The next morning, I hit the road fast. My mind was a mess of questions. What had happened? Had I felt that thing watching me, or had it been in my head all along? I couldn't shake it. As I drove away, a weight settled in my chest. Today, I still think about that trip. Sometimes I wonder if whatever was in those woods followed me home. I still feel like the forest knows me better than I know myself. It haunts me, and I can't explain it. I wish I could forget, but it lingers. When I got back home, I thought the unease would fade, but it didn't. It clung to me like a shadow. My normal routine felt off. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that shadow from the woods again. I tried to shake it off, bury myself in work, but even my studies felt different. The forests I once loved now felt sinister. One evening, I was reviewing my notes from the trip, trying to find some explanation for the disturbances. I was flipping through the pages when I noticed something odd. A series of sketches I had made on one of my notepads. They were rough renditions of the marks I had seen on the ground at the campsite. As I studied them closely, I felt a sense of dread creeping back. The marks resembled claw-like scratches, but what struck me was a detail I had missed before. They formed a pattern, almost a symbol. I grabbed my field guide, a hefty book on regional wildlife. I flicked through the pages, looking for anything that resembled those scratches. It was a long shot, but I needed to know if they matched anything natural. After flipping through more than half the book, I finally found something that made my heart race. A symbol from ancient folklore associated with forest spirits. Spirits that were said to protect their territory from intruders. Frowning, I closed the guide and leaned back in my chair. What did this mean? I hadn't intruded upon anything. I was just camping, like I'd done many times before. Perhaps I wasn't supposed to be there. A chill went down my spine as I recalled the whispers I'd heard that night. That night, sleep evaded me. I kept replaying the trip in my head. The warnings from my mentor echoed in my mind. The wilderness can be both beautiful and dangerous, respected. Had I disrespected something out there? Then came the tapping again. It was faint, but unmistakable. This time, it was at my window. I sat up straight, the realization dawning on me. I wasn't alone in my house. A surge of adrenaline jolted me out of bed. As I turned on the light, the sound stopped. I rushed to the window and looked outside, but all was quiet. I felt ridiculous for getting scared. It was just a tree branch, right? I took a deep breath and laughed at myself, trying to calm my racing heart. But then I noticed something on the glass. Small smudges, like fingerprints. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving through my yard, just at the edge of the trees. My heart dropped. I was back at that campsite, feeling the same sense of dread wash over me. There was something out there. I fumbled for my phone, intending to call someone, but my fingers trembled. Whoever, or whatever, was watching me wasn't going to let me off that easily. I stepped closer to the window, trying to get a better look. As I peered into the darkness, I thought I saw eyes staring back at me. Hunger and malice radiated from them. I stumbled back from the window, breathing heavily, the weight on my chest growing heavier. I needed to find out what was happening, and fast. I just hoped I wasn't too late. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The events of the night pressed heavily on me, my mind racing with confusion and fear. I needed answers. The folklore I had read talked of rituals, of respecting boundaries. If I had crossed a line, I needed to know how to make it right. With an unsettling resolve, I grabbed my backpack and headed toward the local library. The old building felt familiar, yet its musty air felt different today, like it was aware of my anxiety. I approached the reference desk, where Mrs. Holland, the librarian, was organizing some books. She looked up and offered a warm smile, but I could see concern etched on her face. "Everything okay, dear? You seem a bit on edge," she said, tilting her head slightly. I hesitated, debating whether to confide in her. I recently came back from a camping trip and, well, some strange things happened. I quickly summarized my experience without going into too much detail. Her expression shifted. "If it's the woods by Widow's Grove, I might have some materials for you. That area has a history of peculiar occurrences." Her voice dropped as if the very mention of the woods might invoke something. A shiver ran down my spine. I nodded, feeling the urgency rise. She led me to a dusty corner of the library filled with old records and local folklore books. As I looked through the titles, one caught my eye. Whispers of the Forest, Folklore and Fact. My heart raced as I pulled it from the shelf. I spent hours poring over the pages, my mind racing with every revelation. The book detailed stories of intruders who had neared sacred grounds, only to be met with what the locals called the guardians. Tales of warning voices and strange markings echoed in my head. Then I saw it. A drawing of the symbol I had sketched from the campsite, paired with a description of what would happen to those who disregarded the forest's boundaries. They spoke of vivid sightings and shadows lurking in the trees, waiting for the right moment to act. I could barely breathe. I needed to know more. I found a section about local historians who had studied these legends. Some had even gone into the woods to document their findings. Their last known locations were mapped out in the text. I took a photo of the page with my phone, desperate for more information. Just then, Mrs. Holland returned. "Have you found what you needed?" "Almost," I said, feeling a newfound sense of urgency. "Is there anyone who might still be studying these occurrences in the woods?" Her face paled, and she nodded. "There's a man, but he hasn't been seen in weeks. Last I heard, he was investigating strange happenings."
Near Widow's Grove. I felt my pulse quicken. What if he knew something? I had to find him. "Do you have his contact information?" Mrs. Holland fidgeted with her glasses and nodded. "I can give you his address, but—" She paused, her eyes darting around as if checking for listeners. Be careful. Some say he's obsessed with the resurgence of the forest spirits. It may be dangerous. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. My stomach dropped as I reached for it. The message preview read, "You shouldn't have come back." I froze. Someone was watching, and I had to act fast. I stumbled out of the library, my mind racing. Whoever warned me with that message clearly knew about my camping trip and the risks lurking in Widow's Grove. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. What had I stirred up in those woods? I walked briskly to my car, trying to piece together a plan. Finding the historian could be crucial. The address Mrs. Holland had given me was on the outskirts of town, near the forest itself. A part of me wanted to turn back and stay safe in the crowd of the library, but I felt a pull, an obligation to uncover the truth. I drove along winding roads, anxiety making my palms sweaty against the steering wheel. The trees lining the streets felt heavier than before, as if they were whispering secrets I wasn't allowed to hear. As I approached the address, I spotted a small, weathered cabin surrounded by tall, overgrown grass. There were no other houses nearby, just an uneasy stillness. I parked and cautiously walked up to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Knocking 3 times, I felt like an intruder stepping into a turning point I might not be able to reverse. After a moment of silence, I knocked again. "Hello?" I called out, hesitant. "Is anyone home?" No response. I decided to try the doorknob. To my surprise, it turned easily, the door creaking open. Inside, the air was stale, almost suffocating. Shadows moved strangely on the walls, and random objects cluttered the floor, giving the space a sense of abandonment and hasty departure. As I stepped inside, I noticed stacks of books piled high on a table, scattered notes covered in frantic handwriting, and an old map pinned to the wall. My breath caught when I saw the map. The markings were familiar, showing the very trails I had walked. Next to it was a journal, open to a page where a hasty scrawled message caught my eye. "The guardians are restless. If you hear them, run." I flipped through the journal, flipping past illustrations of symbols, some resembling the marking I had seen in the woods. Then I found a sketch of a figure, similar to the one I had glimpsed near our campsite. My heart raced at the thought. Suddenly, I heard a noise outside. It was a rustle, followed by the crunch of leaves. The unsettling morning quiet shattered as I darted to the window. My stomach twisted when I saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the trees, partially hidden in the foliage. It felt like it was staring right at me. I ducked back, trying to steady my breath. Was it one of the guardians? Panic rose in my throat like bile. I quickly pocketed the journal and map and retreated back to the door, my heart thumping in my ears. As I hesitated, I heard another message buzz through my phone, followed by a chilling whisper echoing through my mind. "Get out while you can." I burst out of the cabin and ran towards this car, adrenaline coursing through me. Whatever was in the woods, it wasn't just a story. There were depths of truth here that I had barely begun to touch. And now something or someone was pursuing me, forcing me to confront the reality of whatever I had awakened. I reached my car just as the forest seemed to come alive behind me. As I slammed the door shut, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't alone anymore. As I sped away from the cabin, the landscape blurred through my windshield, but my heart wouldn't calm down. I couldn't shake the image of that shadowy figure, or the strange messages that seemed to circle around me like a storm. I gripped the wheel harder, pushing the car faster along the winding road. I had to find out more about this historian. Maybe he had answers. But another thought nagged at me. What if it was all a trap? Had I meddled in something I shouldn't have? I cursed myself for being so reckless. I made my way back to town, the library still looming in my mind. The weight of all those books felt like a refuge now. I wanted to dive back into those stories, hoping to find a way to make sense of everything.
The historian could wait. I needed to fuel my knowledge before confronting whatever was out there. Just before I reached the town center, my phone buzzed again. A message. I instinctively checked it. It was from an unknown number. Meet me at the old church tonight. The Church of St. Barnabas was one of those places everyone had heard of, but few went near. It sat abandoned at the edge of town, draped in tales of disappearances and the dark past of Widow's Grove. I stared at the screen as a chill crept over my arms. Should I really go? A flicker of warning flashed in my mind, but curiosity pulled at me like a magnet. I parked and walked into the library, the buzz of everyday activities providing a brief comfort. I headed straight to the back to the section about the woods. I needed more information, something to prepare me for whatever was brewing in those trees. Hours passed as I pored over books filled with local folklore and history. I noted everything that could be related to the Guardians, the marked trails, anything. My fingers raced across pages, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could find some clue, something to help me piece everything together before the meeting. Then I stumbled upon a brittle page in one of the older tomes. It detailed a local legend. The Guardians were said to protect sacred grounds by preying upon those who sought to disturb their slumber. The more I read, the clearer it became. I was in over my head. These weren't just stories, they were warnings. When I finally looked up, I found that the library was almost empty. Evening had turned into night. I had lost track of time. Anxiety twisted in my stomach once more. I had to head to the church. I left the library and climbed into my car again, the familiar sense of dread creeping back. The streets were eerily quiet, and the chill in the air matched the sense of foreboding I felt about the old church. Arriving at the church, shadows loomed large as I stepped out into the stillness. I could barely make out the outline of the building in the dim light. As I approached the door, I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. My breath caught in my throat. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe paranoia was taking hold of me. But then I heard it again, and this time it was a voice, a low whisper that sent shivers up my spine. Don't let it find you. I froze. Heavy silence enveloped me. Someone else was here, and they were warning me. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I had to find out who or what awaited me inside. I reached for the heavy door, and just as I prepared to push it open, an unsettling thought struck me. What if this wasn't just another piece of the puzzle? What if this was the trap? I pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly, echoing through the empty space. The air inside smelt musty, like the remnants of old wood and dust. Dim moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting eerie shadows on the stone floor. I paused, my senses heightened, scanning for any sign of movement. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaking. The old building seemed to swallow my words. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a finality that knocked the breath from my lungs. The church was bigger than I expected. Rows of ancient pews sat in silence, their surfaces worn smooth by years of use. I remembered the stories I had read about this place, its history of strange occurrences, of people disappearing without a trace. My heart raced and I tried to steady it. As I walked further in, I spotted a flicker of light coming from what appeared to be a back room. Hesitantly, I moved toward it, my footsteps barely making a sound against the cold stone. The light pulsed softly, as if inviting me to discover its source. Then I heard the whisper again, closer this time. "Don't let it find you." My skin prickled with fear. What was I even doing here? I turned to leave, but a shadow darted across my path. I spun around, muscles tense. Just like that, the light disappeared, plunging the room into darkness. Panic washed over me as I fumbled for my phone, its screen illuminating my shaking hand. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the church. Tall and cloaked, its features were obscured by the darkness. I could feel its gaze on me, piercing and cold. I was rooted to the spot, my instincts screaming at me to run. "Who are you?" I shouted, sounding braver than I felt. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it lifted an arm and pointed straight at me. I felt a weight pressing down on me, an invisible force that made it hard to breathe. I stumbled back, my heart racing, desperate to escape this nightmare. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure dissipated into the shadows. I stared, disbelief overtaking my fear. I had to get out of here. I turned to bolt for the door, but that's when I noticed something lying near the pulpit. It was a book, its cover worn and weathered. I glanced back toward where the figure had stood. The air felt charged, like something significant was happening. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer to the pulpit and picked up the book. The weight of it felt familiar. That's when I noticed the title, Guardians of the Forest. My breath hitched. Could this be another piece of the puzzle? As I flipped through the pages, I felt eyes upon me again. I looked up, my gut twisting. Shadows were shifting at the corners of my vision. I didn't have much time. I shoved the book into my backpack and made a break for the door. The moment I reached it, the whispers grew louder, echoing in the empty space. I flung the door open, sprinting into the cool night air. But as I dashed away, I knew one thing for sure. I hadn't escaped whatever was haunting this place. I raced past the church, glancing back once more, and saw a figure standing in the doorway, watching me leave. The chill in my spine was clawing at my resolve. I had to learn more about the Guardians and the connection to whatever had just terrified me. And most importantly, I had to know if it was a trap or if I was being hunted. The next morning was bright but felt heavy with dread. I sat at my kitchen table, the book open in front of me. I had barely slept, haunted by the figure in the church and the strange whispers. The pages of Guardians of the Forest were filled with dark tales about a protector of the woods who turned vengeful when disturbed. Some stories spoke of those who ventured too close, never to return. I had to know more. I grabbed my phone and typed Guardians of the Forest. A few articles popped up, mostly folklore websites discussing local legends. But one link caught my eye. It was an online forum dedicated to paranormal experiences and missing persons. My hands trembled as I clicked it. I scrolled through pages filled with accounts. A recent post jumped out at me. Someone had gone missing from a campsite near the woods that bordered the church. There were chilling similarities to the stories I had read. I couldn't shake the feeling I was connected to all of this somehow. An unexpected ding from my phone pulled me from my thoughts. A text from my friend Max read, "Did you hear about the campfire stories last night? People are saying someone went out to the forest near the church." I felt a surge of determination. I texted him back, "I need to see what's out there. Are you in?" He replied almost instantly, "Always." "When?" I glanced outside. The sky was blue, clear, and everything seemed too normal for what I had just experienced. "How about now?" Max picked me up within minutes. I filled him in on everything, the church, the figure, and the book. He raised an eyebrow as I handed it to him. "You really think we'll find something?" "We have to try," I said, my voice firm despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. As we drove to the forest lining the church, dread settled in again, heavy as fog. Once parked, we stepped into the thick brush. The trees towered above us, casting long shadows. Despite the sunlight, the air felt different, charged, almost alive. We wandered deeper, following a faint path that twisted and turned, the undergrowth rustling with every step. Max picked up a stick, wielding it like a sword, trying to ease the tension. "You got your phone on you?" he asked. "Yeah, just in case," I said, more for my own comfort than anything else.
Then, without warning, I heard the sound again. Whispers floated through the trees, flowing through the leaves like gentle wind. I stopped, a cold shiver racing down my back. Did you hear that? What? Max glanced at me curiously, a hint of amusement flickering in his eyes. The whispers intensified, more frantic this time, urgent. Don't let it find you. My breath quickened. I turned back to Max, panic creeping in. We need to leave, now. Before I could even finish my sentence, a loud crack echoed through the trees, a branch snapping nearby. We froze. I looked at Max, who wore a grim expression. What was that? Suddenly, something moved in the corner of my eye. A shadow darted between the trees, quick and silent. My heart raced as I pointed. Did you see that? Max
Nodded, his mouth a thin line. Yeah, let's go. We took off down the path, adrenaline rushing. But as we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was right behind us, watching, waiting. I could hear it, a soft whisper calling out, weaving through the air. The path twisted and turned, and as I glanced back, fear pulled in my gut. A figure cloaked in shadow stepped into view. Suddenly, time stood still. I knew then that whatever hunted me had found its mark. The figure loomed closer, dark and menacing among the trees. My heart pounded violently as if trying to escape my chest. I pulled Max's arm, urging him to run faster. The path narrowed, forcing us to move in single file. The shadows seemed to stretch and grasp for us as we pushed ahead, my breaths coming in desperate gasps. "Just keep moving," I shouted, trying to drown out the haunting whispers behind us. "We can't look back." Branches snagged at my clothes, tearing at my shirt as I stumbled forward. Max was right beside me, his face set in hard determination, but I could see fear in his eyes. "What the hell is that thing?" he yelled, desperation lacing his tone. "I don't know," I replied, not daring to look back, "but we need to get to the clearing." Memories of the stories flickered in my mind, lost campers, mysterious figures, warnings of the forest's guardian. What had I brought us into? At last, we broke free from the trees and into a small clearing. Sunlight spilled around us, momentarily dispelling the darkness that had been pressing down. We slowed to a halt, breathing heavily, scanning our surroundings. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen. No signal. Panic settled back in as I pushed the button repeatedly, hoping for a miracle. "That was insane," Max panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Did we lose it?" I nodded slowly, unsure. But the whispers continued, lingering in the air like smoke. I felt a deep unease pooling in my gut. Something wasn't right. "That book you found, didn't it mention a clearing?" Max asked, suddenly serious. "What if this is it?" "It did. I think," I stammered. "There was something about a meeting place or a ritual. It warned people not to disturb whatever lives here." As I spoke, a chill swept through the clearing. The air grew thick, and a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I turned to look, but it was gone. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, drowning out my thoughts. "You should not be here." "Did you hear that?" Max's eyes widened. "Yes, we have to go." Just as I grasped Max's arm, a burst of wind whipped through the clearing. It felt alive, almost sentient. The trees shifted, their trunks bending and creaking as though they were stretching into the sky. My heart raced again. I realized we weren't alone. I pointed toward the trees, where a figure loomed again. Masked in shadow, but clearly more substantial than before. Its form wavered, like smoke twisting in a breeze. Instinct kicked in. Run! We dashed back into the forest, branches clawing at us as we navigated through the underbrush, the whispers echoing around us. "You cannot escape," they seemed to chant. The path spiraled and twisted, and I felt myself getting lost. I glanced at Max, who was still beside me but struggling to keep pace. "Stay with me." Then everything went silent.
The whispers vanished, replaced by an eerie stillness that wrapped around us like a woolen blanket. I could feel the weight of something watching, pressing down on my shoulders. Finally, we stopped, braced against a tree, catching our breath. What do we do now? Max looked at me, his eyes pleading. That thing, it's still out here, I said, dread pooling in my stomach. I glanced around, feeling cornered. We need a plan. Before I could suggest anything, a sudden snap of a twig made us both jump. I turned slowly towards the sound, and that's when I saw it. Rising from the shadows, a figure with piercing eyes locked onto mine. I froze, a chill running down my spine. Whatever had been lurking in those woods was right in front of us now, and I suddenly wished for the safety of the church, haunted as it was. The figure stepped forward, revealing more of itself, tall and skeletal, with a face obscured by shadows. Its eyes glowed like coals, bright and unyielding, sending a rush of panic through me. I backed up instinctively, pulling Max with me. "Stay quiet," I whispered, even though my voice shook. "Maybe it won't see us." But it was already too late. The creature tilted its head, as if listening, and then it lunged. We turned and ran again, not daring to look back. Every part of me screamed to escape. The trees crushed in around us like a wall, vines snaking around my legs. I fought through the underbrush, trying to keep my footing. "Why is it chasing us?" Max gasped beside me, almost tripping over a root. "Maybe it senses fear. Just don't stop," I yelled. We stumbled into a small stream, the water cool against my skin as I barely managed to hop over the stones. I could hear the creature crashing through the brush behind us. It sounded heavy, relentless. "Where even are we?" Max shouted. There was desperation in his voice. "I don't know. Just keep moving," I insisted, frowning at the dimming daylight filtering through the canopy. Panic clawed at me. The deeper we went in, the more lost I felt. The shadows around us lengthened. Then, without warning, the path opened up into another clearing, but something about it felt off. The grass was torn in patches, and there were unnatural signs carved into the trees. My heart sank. What if this was the ritual site the book warned about? "There's something wrong here," I said softly, examining the
Strange markings. It looks like symbols? Max replied, stepping closer. What are they? Before I could answer, a dark wind swept through the clearing, carrying the whispers again. I stumbled back, grabbing at Max's arm. "We have to leave." But the shadows seemed to pulse, alive in their depths. From behind one of the trees, two additional figures emerged, mirroring the first, their eyes flickering like dying flames. I felt the ground shift beneath me, and my breath caught. "Are they guarding this place?" Max's voice trembled. "I don't know," I cried, "but we can't stay here." Suddenly, one of the figures spoke. Its voice was more a growl than words, echoing through the clearing. "You have trespassed on sacred ground." I felt the weight of its gaze as it fixed on me. Frost raced through my veins. I turned to Max, panic clearly written on his face. Then, in a split second, everything changed. The figures began to converge, closing in around us. I seized Max's arm, and we bolted again, darting toward the trees on the far side of the clearing. As we dashed through the undergrowth, the whispers morphed into frantic screams. "We need to find a way out, now!" I yelled, each heartbeat echoing in my ears. The forest shifted, like a living maze, branches and roots twisting in ways that didn't make sense. Just when I thought we might lose them, I felt a tug on my shirt. I glanced back, and my stomach dropped. One of the figures had managed to snag me, pulling me hard against a tree. I gasped, struggling to break free. "Max!" I cried out, panic enveloping me. Then a flash of light illuminated the clearing briefly, bringing an urgency with it. In that moment, I finally saw it, the shape of a doorway etched into the bark of the tree, glowing in the night. An escape? Was it a trick? Over here, I yelled, dragging myself toward the light, desperate to find out what the forest had hiding and to see if we could confront whatever had been stalking us. I lunged for the glowing doorway, adrenaline propelling me forward. The figure that had grabbed me snarled, the sound echoing in the darkness, but the light pulsed behind the tree, almost beckoning me in. "Max, hurry!" I shouted, knowing there was no time to lose. He was right behind me, his breath ragged as we reached the tree together. The ethereal light seemed alive, wrapping around us as we pushed through the opening. The sensation of crossing another threshold was palpable, a shift of air, a faint but familiar whisper that both reassured and terrified me. We stumbled into a space that looked like a forest at twilight, yet everything felt off. The trees were twisted, their trunks gnarled, and roots snaking through the ground like serpents. Pale leaves fluttered in an unseen breeze, vibrating with a low hum I could feel in my bones. "What is this place?" asked.
"I don't know, but it feels sacred," I replied, bewildered. The door behind us shimmered faintly before fading into the trunk of the tree, sealing us inside. As we stood there, the whispers rose in intensity, a cacophony that wrapped around us like a fog. It was then I noticed symbols etched into the air around us, swirling and shifting, some resembling the markings on the ground at the campsite. They glowed faintly, illuminating the confusion and fear on Max's face. "What do we do now?" he asked, panic creeping back into his voice. "We find out what this place is," I said, hesitantly moving deeper into the twilight forest. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground was assessing our presence, considering us intruders. Suddenly, the whispers calmed, and a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. As it stepped into view, I realized it was the same ethereal shape that had watched us in the church, a guardian of the woods, perhaps. The light illuminating it shimmered like a mirage, shifting as if it couldn't decide whether to settle into a solid form. "What do you seek here?" the voice resonated, sounding both ancient and youthful at the same time. We didn't mean to disturb anything," I said, my voice shaking. "We just wanted to understand. The camping sites near Widow's Grove, that area is dangerous. I think something is wrong there." The figure shifted, seeming to consider my words. "You trespassed. That place holds memories and guardians. Only the respectful are welcomed within the woods." Max stepped closer, braving his fear. "What do we need to do? How can we make it right?" The guardian paused, shadows playing across its form. "To leave unharmed, you must offer respect and acknowledgement of the bounds you crossed. Not all disturbances can be forgiven. Some linger, drawing darkness closer." "What do you mean?" I swallowed, suddenly feeling the weight of our recklessness. "How do we do that?" "An offering of truth," it said simply. "Speak what you discovered. Only then can you find balance. But beware, what lies beyond this veil can hear and sense deep fear. Speak with wisdom, let your intentions resonate with the forest." The words hung in the air, thick with urgency. I turned to Max, confusion swirling within me. "Do you think we can actually make peace?" Before he could answer, the whispers erupted around us, rising to a crescendo that felt like a storm. Fear clawed at my insides. "I don't think we have a choice." I stepped forward, heart racing. "We found symbols, those markings at the campsite. They protected something, didn't they?" "Yes," the guardian replied, its voice echoing like wind through leaves. "The spirits protect their territory. They guarded that place against those who would disrespect it. You saw what awakened and felt its charge. Speak your truth." I took a deep breath, feeling the ambient energy of the sacred place enveloping me. I realize now that I ignored the lore, the warnings from the townsfolk. I thought the camping trip was just about studying wildlife, but I unintentionally intruded into sacred spaces, I confessed, voice trembling yet steady.
I want to understand. I promise respectful connection from here on out." The figure nodded slowly as the whispers calmed. I glanced at Max, who seemed captivated by the surrealness of what we were doing, but nodded, compelled by my words. "I just wanted to learn more about the wilderness, to protect it," I continued earnestly. "I'm sorry, truly. We owe it to the forest, to everything out there. Please forgive our carelessness." Silence settled around us, thick and heavy. For a moment, it felt as if the very air vibrated with acceptance. The guardian stared, its glowing eyes softening, and the chaos of shadows receded slightly, calming the tension. "Your honesty is noted. Return with intent to learn, not disturb. Others may not embrace your ignorance graciously. Cherish the wild and heed the whispers. There are still threads binding you to it." Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the guardian stepped back, folding into the shadows. The ethereal light dimmed, leaving us standing alone, the silence of the twilight forest enveloping us once more. "Did that just happen? I can't believe it." Max breathed slowly, still processing everything. I think we're safe," I whispered in disbelief. But as we turned to leave, a lingering shadow passed between the trees, a reminder that our connection to the forest was now deeper and potentially more dangerous than ever before. Walking back toward the doorway, the oppressive anxiety receded, but a different weight settled on my chest, a mix of understanding and uncertainty. What if it all continues? What if the darkness we felt follows us? As I stepped through the doorway, I hesitated. The woods loomed behind me, their whispers barely audible but insistent. I turned back and wondered if we had merely postponed whatever consequences awaited us. But part of me also recognized the forest's power, its guardianship, and a path back toward connection. It left me with more questions than answers. I could still feel the weight of the shadows as I emerged back into our world, tempting echoes of the truth I had barely grasped. The night felt heavy yet welcoming, and as we walked back toward the direction of the road, a part of me understood. This wasn't an ending. It was merely the beginning of a different journey, one that would haunt me, shape me, and perhaps lead me back to the woods that were never just about nature, but about the very essence of respect and understanding between worlds.